The hotel room smelled like industrial disinfectant and broken dreams. I sat on the edge of the scratchy polyester bedspread, laptop balanced on my knees, watching my wife destroy our 22-year marriage in real time through the security cameras I'd installed 3 weeks ago. "Pass me that wine," I muttered to Julia, who sat in the chair beside me, her face illuminated by the blue glow of betrayal streaming across my screen. Julia handed me the plastic cup filled with cheap Merlot from the gas station downstairs. We'd been planning this moment for 6 weeks, ever since we'd both discovered our spouses were screwing each other behind our backs. Julia was Neil's wife, Neil being the arrogant creative director who was currently unbuttoning my wife Marta's blouse in my living room. "Look at that," Julia whispered, pointing at the screen. "She's wearing the lingerie you bought her for Christmas." I took a screenshot. Evidence folder number 47. We had enough photographic proof to paper the courthouse, but tonight was about more than documentation. Tonight was about justice. My name is David Chen. No, wait, that's wrong. My name is David Morrison, and I'm a 46-year-old finance director at Brennan & Associates, the same advertising agency where my wife Marta works as an account executive. Worked, I should say. After tonight, her career would be as dead as our marriage. "They're moving to the bedroom," Julia said, her voice tight with controlled rage. She was 43, sharp as a razor, and had been quietly building her own revenge plan when I approached her 6 weeks ago with my evidence. Turned out, she'd been collecting her own. I dialed the number I'd memorized. "Morrison Moving Company? Yeah, I need a full house clearance. 3 hours from now. Remove everything except the items on the list I emailed you." I paused, watching Neil's hands roam over my wife's body. "Everything else goes to storage. Bill me for 6 months up front." Julia was on her phone too. "Miss West? It's Julia Patterson. Yes, we're proceeding tonight. Have the papers ready for service at dawn." On screen, Marta was leading Neil upstairs to our bedroom, the room where we'd conceived our 2 children, where we'd whispered dreams about growing old together, where she'd promised to love me in sickness and health until death do us part. Apparently, she'd found a loophole. "You know what the worst part is?" I said, closing the laptop. "We'd seen enough. She thinks she's being clever. All those late nights working on the Henderson account. All those weekend strategy sessions. She actually thinks I don't know." "Neil's the same way," Julia replied, standing and smoothing her skirt. She was a beautiful woman, not in Marta's flashy, high-maintenance way, but with a quiet elegance that had probably attracted Neil before he got bored and went sniffing around my wife. He's been coming home smelling like her perfume for months, making up elaborate lies about client dinners and creative brainstorming sessions. We gathered our things: cameras, recording equipment, printed photographs, legal documents, our war chest. 6 weeks of surveillance, planning, and coordination had led to this moment. Operation Justice, we'd called it. Juvenile, maybe. But it felt good to name our revenge. "Ready?" I asked. "I've been ready since I found her earring in his car," Julia said. We drove back to Millfield in separate cars, maintaining radio silence. The town was dark except for scattered porch lights and the occasional late-night dog walker. Millfield was the kind of place where everyone knew everyone else's business, which would work perfectly for what we had planned. At 2:17 a.m., I used my key to enter my own house. Julia came in through the back door. I'd given her a spare key weeks ago. The living room showed evidence of their evening: wine glasses on the coffee table, Marta's clothes scattered across the floor, the couch cushions askew. I set up my laptop on the kitchen table and connected it to the surround sound system. Julia arranged the printed photographs in neat stacks beside it. We worked in silence, 2 co-conspirators preparing for the most important presentation of our lives. "She's asleep," Julia whispered, nodding toward the ceiling. "Not for long," I replied, queuing up the video files. At exactly 2:30 a.m., I hit play. The sound of Marta's laughter filled the house at full volume, followed by Neil's voice. "Your husband has no idea how lucky he is. Too bad he's too boring to appreciate what he's got." "David's a good man," Marta's voice replied from the speakers. "But he's predictable, safe. You make me feel alive again." The bedroom door upstairs slammed open. Footsteps thundered down the stairs. Marta appeared in the kitchen doorway, wearing my old college t-shirt, her hair wild from sleep, her face cycling through confusion, horror, and dawning realization. "Surprise," I said calmly. She stared at the laptop screen, where high-definition footage showed her and Neil in passionate embrace just hours earlier. Then she noticed Julia sitting beside me, arms crossed, expression murderous. David, I can explain. Explain what? I interrupted, clicking to the next video. Explain this one from last Tuesday? Or maybe this one from 2 weeks ago? Or perhaps you'd like to explain this particularly athletic session from last Friday afternoon. Julia leaned forward. Hello, Marta. I'm Neil's wife. We need to talk. Marta's face went white. She grabbed the back of a chair to steady herself, her eyes darting between the laptop screen and Julia's face. On the monitor, her betrayal played in vivid detail. Every kiss, every whispered endearment, every moment of passion that should have belonged to our marriage. How long have you known? She whispered. How long have you been screwing my husband? Julia countered. I paused the video on a particularly damning frame. Marta's face, flushed with pleasure. Neil's wedding ring clearly visible as his hand tangled in her hair. To answer your question, I've known for 3 months. I've had proof for 6 weeks. And I've been planning this moment for exactly 43 days. Marta sank into the chair across from us. David, please, we can work this out. It doesn't have to be like this. Work what out? I asked, genuinely curious. The part where you've been lying to my face every day for months? Or the part where you've been fucking another man in our bed while I was traveling for work to pay for this house? Don't be crude, she snapped, some of her old fire returning. Julia laughed, a sharp, bitter sound. Crude. Lady, you want to see crude. She pulled out her phone and started scrolling through photos. How about these text messages your boyfriend sent my husband? The ones describing what he wants to do to you, in graphic detail. I opened a new folder on my laptop. Or we could discuss these financial records, showing how you've been using our joint credit card to pay for hotel rooms. The Marriott downtown, mostly. Room 412 seems to be your favorite. Marta's phone buzzed, then buzzed again, and again. You might want to check that, Julia suggested sweetly. With trembling hands, Marta looked at her phone. Her face went from pale to green. What did you do? We sent a little care package to your family, I explained. Your sister, your parents, your brother Mike. Just a few highlights from tonight's performance, along with a brief explanation of the situation. And I did the same with Neil's family, Julia added. His mother was particularly interested to see what her precious boy has been up to. Marta's phone was buzzing constantly now. Text messages, missed calls, voicemails piling up as our respective families processed the news. You're destroying everything, Marta said, tears starting to flow. No, I corrected. You destroyed everything. We're just making sure everyone knows who's responsible. A car door slammed outside. Heavy footsteps on the front porch, followed by aggressive pounding on the door. That'll be Neil, Julia said, checking her watch. Right on schedule. I walked to the front door and opened it. Neil stood on my porch in wrinkled clothes, his hair disheveled, his face red with anger and panic. Behind him, I could see his BMW parked haphazardly across my lawn. Where is she? He demanded. Good evening, Neil, I said pleasantly. Lovely night, isn't it? He tried to push past me. I stepped aside and let him enter, then followed him into the kitchen where he found his wife sitting calmly at my table and his lover sobbing into her hands. Julia, what the hell are you doing here? He demanded. Comparing notes with David, she replied. Did you know Marta makes the same little noise you told me I make? That thing you said was so special and unique to me? Turns out it's not so unique after all. Neil's face cycled through several emotions before settling on indignation. This is insane. You can't just... I punched him in the face. It wasn't a particularly hard punch. I'm a finance director, not a boxer. But it caught him off guard and sent him stumbling backward into the refrigerator. His nose started bleeding immediately. David, Marta shrieked. That felt good, I said, shaking out my knuckles. I've been wanting to do that for weeks. Julia calmly took a photo of Neil's bloody nose with her phone. Perfect. That'll help with the restraining order. Restraining order? Neil sputtered, holding his nose. Oh yes, Julia said. I filed the paperwork this afternoon. Domestic disturbance, adultery, threatening behavior. You won't be able to come within 500 feet of me or my children. I never threatened you. You did in that voicemail last week. The one where you said you'd make my life hell if I ever tried to leave you. Julia scrolled through her phone. I have it right here if you'd like me to play it. Outside I could hear the rumble of a large truck. Right on time. What's that noise? Marta asked, wiping her eyes. That, I said, looking out the window at the Morrison Moving Company truck pulling into my driveway. Is the sound of your new life beginning? Moving crew was efficient. I'd hired Morrison Moving because they specialized in emergency relocations, usually for domestic violence situations, but they didn't ask questions when the money was good. I'd paid extra for the 3 a.m. service call. Everything except the items on the list, I told the crew chief, handing him a detailed inventory. Anything not on this list goes to Storage Unit 247 at U Store It on Maple Street. Marta watched in horror as 3 burly men began systematically removing her life from our house. Her clothes, her books, her decorative pillows, her extensive collection of scented candles, everything that made the house hers was being loaded into cardboard boxes and carried away. You can't do this, she said. This is my house too. Actually, I said, pulling out a folder of legal documents. It's not. The house is in my name only. We never got around to adding you to the deed, remember? You said it was too much paperwork. Julia was taking photos of everything: Neil's bloody face, the moving truck, Marta's breakdown, the evidence scattered across our kitchen table. Documentation for the divorce proceedings, she'd explained. Her lawyer wanted everything recorded. Neil tried to leave, but I blocked his path. Where are you going, buddy? Home, he muttered through the tissues pressed to his nose. About that, Julia said sweetly. I changed the locks this afternoon and filed a restraining order and had your things moved to your brother's place in Springfield. You can't kick me out of my own house. Actually, I can. The house is in my name only. Funny how that works. By 4 a.m., the moving truck was fully loaded. Marta's entire life fit into one medium-sized truck and a storage unit. She stood in the driveway in her pajamas and my old t-shirt, watching 20 years of accumulated possessions disappear into the night. The neighbors were starting to notice. Mrs. Clemens from next door had her face pressed to her bedroom window. The Johnsons across the street had turned on their porch light. By morning, the whole neighborhood would know something dramatic had happened at the Morrison house. Where am I supposed to go? Marta asked. That's not my problem anymore, I replied. You should have thought about that before you decided to redecorate our marriage. Neil was sitting on my porch steps, still holding tissues to his nose, staring at his phone. His brother had apparently seen the photos Julia sent and wasn't answering his calls. We love each other. What Marta and I have is real. Real? Julia laughed. You told me the same thing last month when you bought me flowers for our anniversary. You said our love was real and eternal and stronger than anything. That's different. The only thing that's different is that you got caught. I walked over to Neil and crouched down so we were eye level. Let me explain something to you, Neil. You didn't just sleep with my wife. You disrespected my home, my family, my children. You used my bed, drank my wine, and made a fool of me in front of people I work with every day. David, I'm not finished. You made a choice. You both made choices. Now you get to live with the consequences. The moving truck pulled away, taking Marta's possessions into the pre-dawn darkness. She was left standing in my driveway with nothing but the clothes on her back and a phone full of angry messages from family members. I need to get some things, she said. Clothes, toiletries. Make a list, I said. I'll have Julia pack a bag and leave it on the porch tomorrow. You're being unreasonable. I'm being generous. I could have changed the locks and left your stuff on the lawn for the neighbors to pick through. Julia stood up and smoothed her skirt. Well, this has been fun, but I have restraining orders to serve and divorce papers to file. Neil, you have 24 hours to collect your things from David's workplace. After that, security has instructions to escort you off the property. You can't get me fired. I don't have to get you fired. David's going to do that for me. Neil looked at me with dawning horror. You wouldn't. Watch me. Monday morning arrived gray and cold, matching my mood perfectly. I sat in my office at Brennan & Associates, sipping coffee and reviewing the email I was about to send to the entire company. Julia had helped me craft it over the weekend, a masterpiece of professional language that would destroy 2 careers while maintaining complete legal cover. The email was simple, a formal notification that I would be filing for divorce due to my wife's affair with a coworker, and that I wanted to ensure there would be no workplace disruption during this difficult time. Attached were several carefully selected photographs and a brief timeline of events. I hit send at exactly 9:15 a.m. By 9:30, my phone was ringing. David, what the hell is this? It was Dave Brennan. the company owner and Marta's direct supervisor. It's exactly what it says, Dave. My wife has been having an affair with Neil Patterson for the past 4 months. I thought you should know, given that they both work here and have been using company time and resources to facilitate their relationship. You can't just. This is a private matter. It stopped being private when they started screwing in hotel rooms paid for with company credit cards. Check the Henderson account expenses from last month. You'll find some interesting charges. There was silence on the other end of the line. I want them both in my office in 10 minutes, Dave said finally. Neil won't be coming in today. He's dealing with some legal issues. Restraining orders, you understand. Jesus Christ, David. No, sir. Just a man who's tired of being made a fool of. I hung up and leaned back in my chair. Through my office window, I could see Marta's desk in the main workspace. She hadn't arrived yet, probably still trying to find somewhere to sleep after I'd had her things moved out. The hotel room she'd shared with Neil was no longer an option, since Julia had thoughtfully informed the management about what had been happening in their establishment. My computer chimed with incoming emails. The entire office had received my message, and the responses were pouring in. Some supportive, some shocked, some clearly taking sides. By lunch, everyone in the building would have seen the evidence of my wife's betrayal. At 10:45, Marta finally arrived. I watched through my window as she walked to her desk, trying to ignore the stares and whispered conversations following her across the room. She looked like she hadn't slept, which was probably accurate, since she'd spent the night in her car in the parking lot of a 24-hour diner. Her computer was gone. Her desk had been cleared out. A security guard stood nearby with a cardboard box containing her personal items. Mrs. Morrison? The security guard's voice carried across the quiet office. Mr. Brennan would like to see you in his office. The walk of shame across the office floor took exactly 93 seconds. I timed it. Every eye in the place was on her as she made her way to Dave's corner office, her heels clicking against the tile floor like a countdown to execution. She was fired before noon. The official reason was inappropriate use of company resources and violation of workplace conduct policies. The real reason was that Dave couldn't afford to keep her on staff after the scandal broke. Brennan and Associates was a family business with a reputation to maintain. Neil's termination was handled by email. He never even made it into the building. By 2 p.m., I was the most popular man in the office. Coworkers who'd barely spoken to me before were stopping by my desk to offer support, share similar stories, or just get the latest gossip. I was the victim, the wronged party, the man who'd stood up for himself against betrayal. It felt good, better than good. It felt like justice. My phone buzzed with a text from Julia. Phase 2 complete. Neil's been served with divorce papers. His lawyer says he wants to contest it. I texted back. Let him try. We have enough evidence to bury him. Meeting tonight? We need to plan phase 3. Absolutely. My place at 7. I spent the rest of the afternoon fielding calls from friends, family members, and neighbors who'd heard about the divorce. Word traveled fast in a town like Millfield, especially when it involved public humiliation and moving trucks at 3 a.m. My sister called from Portland. David, I just heard. Are you okay? I'm better than okay, Sarah. I'm free. Do you need anything? I can drive down this weekend. I'm fine, really. This is the best thing that could have happened to me. But 22 years of marriage. 22 years of marriage to someone who didn't respect me enough to stay faithful. I'm better off without her. My kids called too. Ross and Amelia were both away at college, and the news had reached them through the family grapevine. They were confused, hurt, angry, all the emotions I'd expected. But they were also adults, old enough to understand that their mother had made choices that led to consequences. Dad, is it true? Amelia asked. Did Mom really? Yes, sweetheart, it's true. I'm sorry you had to find out this way. I can't believe she would do that to you, to us. People make mistakes, Amelia. Sometimes those mistakes have permanent consequences. Are you going to be okay? I'm going to be fine, better than fine. And I meant it. For the first time in months, I felt like I was in control of my own life. Julia arrived at my house at exactly 7 p.m., carrying a bottle of wine and a thick folder of legal documents. She'd changed out of her business attire into jeans and a sweater, looking more relaxed than I'd seen her since this whole thing started. How was your day? I asked, letting her in. Productive. Neil's lawyer called 3 times trying to negotiate. Apparently, He's willing to give me everything if I agree not to pursue the adultery angle in court. And I told him I'd consider it if Neil agrees to give up all parental rights and moves out of state. We settled in the living room, the same room where Marta and Neil had conducted their affair just days earlier. I'd had the furniture professionally cleaned, but I was still planning to redecorate. Too many bad memories. I got a call from Dave Brennan this afternoon, I said, pouring wine. Apparently Marta tried to get her job back. She told him the whole thing was a misunderstanding and that I was having some kind of breakdown. What did he say? He told her that sleeping with a coworker in company-paid hotel rooms wasn't a misunderstanding. She's blacklisted from every agency in the city. Julia raised her glass. To professional consequences. To professional consequences. We clinked glasses and drank. The wine was good, much better than the cheap stuff we'd shared in the hotel room. Everything felt more civilized now, more controlled. We were no longer desperate people plotting revenge in a dingy motel. We were two adults taking charge of our lives. I've been thinking about Phase 3, Julia said, opening her folder. The block party is this weekend. Every year, our neighborhood held a summer block party. Grilled food, live music, games for the kids, and enough alcohol to loosen tongues and lower inhibitions. It was the social event of the season, and this year it would be the perfect venue for the final act of our revenge. I volunteered to help with the sound system, I said. Amazing what people will let you do when they feel sorry for you. And I've offered to help with the slideshow. You know, the one they always do with photos from neighborhood events throughout the year. We looked at each other and smiled. Great minds thinking alike. How many people usually attend? Julia asked. Last year it was about 200. Pretty much everyone within a 6-block radius, plus friends and family. Perfect audience size. We spent the next 2 hours planning every detail. The timing, the technical requirements, the backup plans in case something went wrong. We'd learned a lot about coordination and preparation over the past few weeks, and we weren't going to leave anything to chance. There's something else, Julia said, as we finished the bottle of wine. I hired a private investigator to look into Neil's background. You know, just to make sure we hadn't missed anything. And? Turns out your wife isn't his first affair. He's been cheating on me for years. The PI found evidence of at least 3 other women, including a secretary at his previous job, who filed a sexual harassment complaint. I felt a surge of anger on Julia's behalf. Why didn't she report it? She did. The company buried it with a settlement and a non-disclosure agreement. But the PI has contacts, and NDAs don't apply to divorce proceedings. So Neil's not just an adulterer, he's a serial adulterer and a sexual predator. The PI thinks there might be more women who haven't come forward yet. This changed things. What we were doing wasn't just about revenge anymore. It was about protecting other potential victims. Neil needed to be exposed, not just as a cheater, but as someone who used his position of power to exploit women. We need to include this in the presentation, I said. Already planned for it. I've got copies of the harassment complaint, the settlement documents, and statements from 2 of the other women he cheated with. Jesus, Julia, how long have you been planning this? Since the day I married him, apparently. I just didn't know it yet. We talked until nearly midnight, refining our plan and sharing stories about our respective spouses' betrayals. It was therapeutic in a way. Finally having someone who understood exactly what I was going through. Someone who'd been hurt in the same way by the same people. Can I ask you something? Julia said as she was getting ready to leave. Sure. Do you think we're going too far? I mean, what we're planning for Saturday, it's going to destroy them completely. I thought about it for a moment. Do you remember what they were doing in my living room while we sat in that hotel room planning this? Yes. They weren't thinking about going too far then. They were thinking about themselves, their pleasure, their desires. They didn't care about the consequences for us, or our children, or our families. You're right. They made their choices, Julia. Now they get to live with the results. She nodded and gathered her things. See you Saturday. See you Saturday. After she left, I sat in my quiet house and thought about how much my life had changed in just 1 week. 7 days ago, I'd been a married man living a lie. Now I was free, in control, and about to deliver justice to the people who'd wronged me. It felt good to be the one making the choices for a change. Saturday arrived bright and sunny. Perfect weather for a neighborhood block party and public humiliation. I spent the morning setting up the sound system and testing the audio-visual equipment with the help of Tom Bradley, our neighborhood association president. "This is quite a setup, David," Tom said, admiring the large screen I'd rented for the occasion. "Much better than what we usually have. I wanted to contribute something special this year," I replied, connecting my laptop to the projection system. "After everything that's happened, I felt like I owed the neighborhood a little entertainment." Tom nodded sympathetically. The story of my divorce had spread through the community faster than a summer cold. Everyone knew about Marta's affair, the 3 a.m. moving truck, and the dramatic firings at Brennan and Associates. I was the neighborhood's celebrity victim, and people couldn't stop offering their support. "If there's anything Linda and I can do," Tom began. "Actually, there is something. I'd like to say a few words during the presentation tonight. About community, loyalty, and knowing who your real friends are." "Of course, David. You take all the time you need." By 4 p.m., the party was in full swing. The street had been blocked off to traffic. Grills were smoking. Children were running around with water balloons, and the adults were working their way through an impressive collection of beer and wine. I moved through the crowd, accepting condolences and support, playing the role of the gracious victim. Julia arrived at 5 p.m. with her sister and her 2 teenage children. She'd moved in with her sister after kicking Neil out, and the kids were still processing their parents' divorce. They looked uncomfortable at the neighborhood gathering, but Julia had insisted they come. "Everything ready?" she asked quietly when she found me by the sound booth. "Ready and tested. You have the files?" "On 3 different USB drives, just in case." We'd prepared a multimedia presentation that would make our case to the entire neighborhood. Photos, videos, documents, and testimony that would expose not just the affair, but Neil's pattern of predatory behavior and Marta's calculated deception. At 7 p.m., as the sun was beginning to set and the crowd had reached its peak, Tom Bradley called for attention. "Ladies and gentlemen, if I could have your attention, please. We have a special presentation tonight, courtesy of our neighbor David Morrison." Applause rippled through the crowd. I stepped up to the microphone, looking out at nearly 200 faces, friends, neighbors, acquaintances, and a few people I didn't recognize, who'd probably come for the free food and entertainment. "Thank you all for being here tonight," I began. "As most of you know, I've been going through a difficult time lately. My marriage of 22 years has ended, and I've learned some hard lessons about trust, loyalty, and the importance of community support." More applause. I could see some people nodding, their faces full of sympathy and understanding. "Tonight, I want to share my story with all of you, not because I'm looking for pity, but because I believe in honesty and accountability. I believe that when people make choices that hurt others, there should be consequences." I clicked the remote, and the first image appeared on the screen behind me. It was a wedding photo, Marta and me on our wedding day, young and happy and full of hope for the future. "This is how it started," I said. 2 people making promises to each other, promises about love, faithfulness, and building a life together. Click. The next image was a family photo from last Christmas. Marta, me, and our 2 children around the Christmas tree. And this is what those promises built: a family, a home, a life that I thought was solid and secure. I paused, letting the crowd absorb the images of my seemingly perfect family life. But appearances can be deceiving. Click. The screen filled with a photograph of Marta and Neil kissing in the parking lot of the Marriott downtown. The crowd gasped. Several people pulled out their phones to take pictures of the screen. "This was taken 6 weeks ago," I continued, my voice steady and calm. "My wife, Marta Morrison, and her lover, Neil Patterson, celebrating their 4-month affair with a romantic afternoon at a hotel paid for with our joint credit card." The crowd was completely silent now, hanging on every word. But that's not the whole story. Click. A series of documents appeared on screen: the sexual harassment complaint against Neil, the settlement agreement, statements from his other victims. It turns out that Neil Patterson has been using his position of power to prey on women for years. My wife wasn't his first victim, and she wouldn't have been his last. Julia stepped up beside me, taking the microphone. "I'm Julia Patterson, Neil's wife, or rather, his ex-wife, as of yesterday morning. I want you all to know that David and I have been working together to expose not just an affair, but a pattern of predatory behavior that has hurt multiple women and families." She clicked to the next slide, showing a timeline of Neil's affairs and harassment incidents going back 5 years. "This isn't about revenge," Julia continued. "This is about justice. It's about making sure that people who abuse their power and hurt innocent families face consequences for their actions." The crowd was getting restless. I could hear murmurs of anger, see people shaking their heads in disgust. The mood was turning, and it was turning in our favor. "Where are they now?" someone called out from the crowd. "Good question," I said, taking the microphone back. "Marta is currently living in her car, having been fired from her job and evicted from our home. Neil is staying with his brother in Springfield, also unemployed and facing multiple lawsuits." "Good!" someone shouted. "They got what they deserved." The crowd erupted in applause and cheers. I felt a surge of vindication, of justice served and wrongs made right. But we weren't finished yet. As the applause died down, I held up my hand for silence. "There's one more thing I need to share with all of you. Something I discovered just this week that makes this situation even more disturbing." I clicked to the next slide, which showed a series of emails between Marta and her boss, Dave Brennan. It turns out that my wife's affair wasn't just a personal betrayal. It was part of a larger conspiracy to manipulate and control the people around them. The crowd leaned in, hungry for more drama. Dave Brennan, the owner of the advertising agency where Marta and Neil worked, actively encouraged their affair. He thought that if he could get them together, he could use their relationship to control them both and advance his own interests. Julia clicked to the next slide, showing text messages between Dave and Marta. These messages showed Dave promising Marta a promotion if she could keep Neil happy and distracted. He was using my wife as bait to manipulate his own employee. The crowd was getting angry now. I could see faces twisted with disgust and outrage. This wasn't just about adultery anymore. It was about corruption, manipulation, and the abuse of power. "But here's the beautiful part," I continued, smiling for the first time all evening. Dave's plan backfired spectacularly. Instead of gaining control over Neil and Marta, he ended up losing both of them when their affair was exposed. And when I sent these emails to the board of directors at Brennan and Associates, they fired him too. The crowd erupted again, this time with genuine cheers and laughter. Justice had been served not just to the cheaters, but to their enabler as well. "So let me summarize," I said, raising my voice over the noise. Marta Morrison, Neil Patterson, and Dave Brennan all thought they were smarter than everyone else. They thought they could lie, cheat, manipulate, and abuse their power without consequences. They were wrong. I clicked to the final slide, which showed a simple message: actions have consequences. Tonight, I want to thank all of you for your support during this difficult time. I want to thank Julia Patterson for her courage in standing up to her abusive husband. And I want to thank the universe for giving me the opportunity to show 3 very bad people that their actions have consequences. The applause was thunderous now. People were standing, cheering, taking pictures and videos. I felt like a rock star, like a conquering hero returning from battle. But the best part was still to come. As the crowd began to disperse and people started cleaning up from the party, I noticed a familiar car parked at